XIV Beats.
Street Village.
Sounds good, Andre. Smooth handoff. Not bad. Could have been better. A little fumble, but you know, it's all right.
It's all good. So I see Krawitz, born in Krawitz. Hey man, I'm really looking forward to having you on before Numpties, man, and just being able to hang out with you, chat with you, pick your brain a little bit. You're one of my favorite thinkers, man. Everything you say always has an interesting spin. I love the way you bring a lot of philosophy, science, and economics in the things that you say. So I'm really looking forward to being able to chat with you, bro. Yeah, so if any of you have questions, things you want to ask me about, things you want me to talk about, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm basically going to take a couple of different approaches here, and I'll just allow anything that spontaneously comes to mind to come out too. But Deryk and I and on talking a bit about just Bitcoin. I've been having a lot of conversations with family and friends about what Bitcoin is. And one of the hardest things about introducing people to Bitcoin is that it's really difficult to first piece of information that is both comprehensive and digestible. You know, if it's comprehensive, it usually has so much information that it's overwhelming and confusing. If it's digestible, it's usually very oversimplified and may not be enough to really capture people's interest or explain to them what makes Bitcoin so important. And so I want to have the conversation with Deryk at, I want you to look into Bitcoin. Here's the link. Here's the only link you need right now. Just go listen to this conversation with my friend about what is Bitcoin and why it matters. And so whenever he pops on, I'm just going to ask him a lot of the questions that either family and friends do ask me or that I anticipate they would ask me. And then we'll kind of go back and forth with our thoughts and insights about what it means and why it matters, and why in a world where we're, or at least in a country where we're so comfortable with existing payment networks and payment systems, creation, it's information commodity. I got you, but like if I say that to my family, they're gonna be like, okay, what does that mean? So yeah, I want to be able to explain it to them in a way that gets them excited and that's very clear. So I'm gonna have that conversation when Deryk pops in. Kick things off though, I thought something that could be cool to do, since this is the Twetch cast and we talk a lot about Twetch, is I'm always on there putting in my 2 cents and just kind of sharing thoughts that could probably be categorized as self-help, motivation, things like that. And I thought it might be cool for me to maybe go over some of these Twetches and talk about what made me write that Twetch, or talk a little bit about behind that idea. What's the conviction or broader concept that's behind that idea, and kind of make this a little session in TK's 2 cents. So and maybe guys, if you're hanging out in the background, feel free to just dive in, feel free to challenge me, ask me questions, or vibe with me, or feel free to just too. That sound.
That sounds good to me, buddy. I'm really enjoying listening to this Radio TK right now.
I gotta adjust the Barry White feature on my mic. I need that where I can turn my voice down a few octaves.
TK, you sounding good, man. You're making this for sure.
It's awesome, man. So, you know, before I read any Twetches and add about them, just a little bit about this idea of self-help. So politically, I come from what might be described as a libertarian background, but there's a talk on YouTube, very interesting talk by Carl Hess and Robert Anton Wilson. And Robert Anton Wilson says, "I say that I'm a libertarian, but that's only because most people don't know what an anarchist is, and they can't really understand what that is." And when I heard his answer, I thought, "Oh, that's so perfect. I absolutely love that." You know, in a nutshell, I'm a person who believes that free markets can do anything better than the power of coercion can. And that if you want to create a flourishing society, a free society, in which people have the best chance of actualizing the very best of human potential, that a society grounded in creativity rather than coercion is the way to go. And so I have a very passionate interest in individual power, but not just from the standpoint of protecting individuals from having their rights violated by the state or by others, but really helping individuals respect the power that they have to change the world. And when a lot of people hear that, their initial thought is, "Oh, that's just kind of like what Oprah does," right? Or, "Oh, that's just sort of like this kind of cheesy stuff where you look in the mirror and you say, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough." But I think it's a lot deeper than that. And I think when you really sit back and you analyze a lot of the political problems in the world, I think they all flow downstream from a lack of respect that individuals have for their creative power. I'll give you one example of this. There's never a shortage, for instance, of politicians who will offer you free goodies and easy answers in exchange for your freedom. Just give up your freedom and I'll answer that question quickly for you. I'll make you feel safe again. I'll make you feel good. I'll give you some money, you know, just give up your freedom. We see an example of this in the money printing that's coming along. Easy answer, right? It doesn't require a whole lot of thinking to just print more money and, you know, flood the economy with more dollars. And there's never a shortage of that. And when you ask yourself, well, why is it that people are so quick to give up their freedom in exchange for free goodies? It's because people don't have a deep and abiding conviction that they have the permission and the power to be the predominant creative force in their own lives without someone like politicians being the ones to make decisions for them, being the ones to bail them out, being the ones to help them. You know, when you know who you are and you believe in your ability to get things done and you carry yourself with self-confidence and you have a high level of self-respect, many of the people that are trusted and that are revered as if they are gods, you know, they appear laughable. It's very hard to take them seriously. So I think we significantly underestimate the degree to which we can cure so many ills in society and render so many evil people irrelevant if we taught people how to protect themselves, how to defend themselves, how to provide for themselves, how to educate themselves, how to be independent. But the more powerless people feel, the more permission-based people's mindset, the more people feel like, yeah, power is this thing that other people have, but it's not located in me. And the more susceptible people will be to all manner of deception.
TK,
Favorite stories. Yeah.
you got the world mesmerized here, man. You got Josh Petty like a little fangirl in the chat.
Josh Petty, what's happening, man? What's happening, Josh? Absolutely, man. We're here to power the individual. Here's the way I like to put it. The way I like to put it is, if I had a personal mantra, it would be, I'm not here to merely create a society in which everyone can feel free. I want to create individuals who can figure out how to live freely in any society. And that's very important to me because what freedom is, you understand that freedom is the kind of thing that's always capable of committing acts of self-defeat, that it's always capable of shorting itself, of giving itself away, right? Like I can't be free to love you unless I'm free to hate you. I can't be free to serve you unless I'm free to steal from you or harm you or defraud you in some kind of way. Like being free works both ways. There's no such thing as a kind of freedom without risk. So no matter how you set up a society politically, there is no possible way you can set up a world will magically transform freedom to the kind of thing that people cannot abandon with stupid self-defeating choices. And why is that important? Why is that important to point out? Because and live with security that it's going to always be there, independently of how much we fight for it, independently of the ways that we step up to protect it, to defend it, to make sure that it's fed and that it's nourished. And so for me, it's far more important to address freedom on an individual level and convince as many people as I possibly can that freedom is something that they have the power to create. And whether we ever get a society that is mostly free or not, of this we can always be sure that should we ever achieve such a lofty goal, we'll always be able to lose it just like that overnight if people don't have sufficient respect for their personal power. As long as power is something that is secondary to you, as long as it is something that is located outside of yourself, then freedom is always just one choice away from being lost. So I was getting ready to share a little story. It's from Twilight Zone. It's called A Penny for Your Thoughts. And it's a story about a man who works at a bank, and he's late for work, and he's walking, and he sees this guy, selling trinkets out of a cart, on the sidewalk. And the guy stops the banker and he's like, "Hey, I've got something for you. I know exactly what you need." And he gives the banker a penny. And the banker's in a rush. He doesn't really have time to question anyone or argue with anyone. And he's just like, okay, whatever. And so he puts the penny in his pocket and he starts walking. And he hears the voice of another man say something rather insulting to him. And he turns around and he says, "What did you say?" And the guy is like, "I didn't say anything to you." And he thinks to himself, "Well, that's pretty weird. I'm sure I heard you say something. Oh, well." And he continues forward. Here's the voice of a woman say something that sounds rather rude. And, "What did you say?" She says, "I didn't say anything to you, sir." And he thinks, "Man, am I losing my mind? This is weird." And then finally, something strange occurs to him. He realizes that this penny he has been given is a magic penny. It's a penny that confers upon him the ability to hear other people's thoughts. And he thinks to himself, "Wow, I got a magic penny." And he proceeds to do what you and I would do, anyone that we know would do, at possession of a magic, begins to eavesdrop on other people's thoughts. And all he has to do is kind of just like look at people, their direction, and he can pick up thoughts. And so he goes to work, and he's determined to make this a really fun day now. And he's listening to people, and he's just sort of like indulging in secret, private, innermost thoughts. And there's an older guy who works at the bank, and he's sitting in the corner. And when he looks at this guy, he hears something that's quite troubling. Here's the following inner monologue. The older guy says to himself, "I've been working at this bank for many years, and no one's ever shown me any appreciation. Today's the day I'm going to show them." Let me pause here for a quick second. This guy at the bank, he had a lot of trust. No one ever told him thank you for your work. No one ever expressed appreciation, but he had a lot of trust. And he had this quirky little habit where every day he would take his little book and he would go into the vault and shut himself up in the vault. And he would read during lunchtime. He would have his little lunch out of his paper bag. He would read his little book, and then he'd come out when the break was over. And because he was a rather harmless fellow, nobody ever had a problem with it. And this day he thinks to himself, "Well, hey, trust to my advantage and go in the vault, because I usually do. I'm going to put the money in my bag. I'm going to walk out of here. You will never see me again." And that'll show them. It'll show them to not say thank you. That'll show them to not appreciate me. I see my man popping in. I'm gonna wrap up this story, wrap up this point, then we can dive into what we do. He says that'll show them, right? And guy who hears it, the guy with the magic penny, he's like, no, I got to do something about it. I got to do something about this. I can't let this guy get away with robbing the bank. And so he goes and he grabs the manager. He's like, hey, look, I know this is going to sound really crazy, but on my way to work today, I passed up this guy who was selling, trinkets out of a cart. He gives me this penny, gives me the ability to read other people's mind. And I hear all these people's thoughts. And I heard this guy's thoughts, and he said he's going to rob the bank. We got to do something about it. Just like, yeah. Why don't you hang back right here? And I'm going to get security, and I'll have you tell them what you just said. And so he goes and gets security. And the guy says, hey, look, I know it sounds crazy, but I got this magic penny. I can hear other people's thoughts. It was all fun and games. But then I heard this guy's thoughts, and he says he's going to rob the bank. About it. How are we going to stop it? And it's probably not surprising to you, even if you've never seen it, even if you've never heard the story. They react to this guy as if he's absolutely insane. No one takes him seriously. But within the context of the story, he really does have a magic penny. He really does see the problem. He really does possess a solution. And no one takes him seriously. The guy that knows the truth in this situation is unable to act on that truth because no one believes his story. And by the way, that's a pretty interesting metaphor for how many of us feel about life, about creative ideas, entrepreneurial ideas. Bitcoin, right? Where you feel like you have this important truth, you have this important insight, and the world will be so much better off if people listen to you. And instead of praising you for your foresight or your perceptiveness, they say they take it as evidence that you're actually a crazy person. And that's the situation that this guy was in. But what's interesting to me about this story is that when you look a little deeper, you find the source of this guy's problem is not that no one listened to him. It's not that the manager didn't believe him or that the security guard didn't believe him. That's not the source of his problem at all. The real source is that his default for solving a problem and making a difference was to think in terms of the permission-based reality. It was to think in terms of running to someone else who has power, because God forbid that could possibly be me, and then begging that person to see reality your way, and then trying to get them to use their power to make a difference. And when you approach change in that way, when you approach the creation of a free society in that way, you always feel frustrated. You always feel powerless. And that's why everyone's mad all the time, because they have a concept of power that says it's not something that exists in me and that I can act on to create the changes that I want to see. It's something that exists in the people with the money, the people in political positions. And I got to go around arguing with people who don't see it my way. And if I can get them to see it my way, then they can use their power to make a difference. But power is more like Morpheus in the Matrix when him and Commander Locke are arguing, and Commander Locke says, darn it, Morpheus, not everybody believes in oracles and fairies and all this kind of woo-woo stuff. Not everybody believes as you believe. And then Morpheus says, fortunately, my beliefs do not require them to. What was the level of consciousness from which he uttered those words? It was a sense of understanding that his ability to create a result could be achieved, or rather expressed, independently of other people's intellectual dissent. And so when you go to the story of the man with the magic penny, he could have easily solved that problem by just going to the guy and saying, hey, man, I've been working with you for like 10 years, and I realize we don't even know each other. Like, we should have coffee, man. We should have lunch. I'd love to just get to know you. And then he can make the guy feel appreciated, right? It's an easy idea. Anybody could have thought of that, but it's really hard to come up with that idea or notion of power is, hey, let me go find the guy in charge. Hey, let me go find the guy with the keys, the guy with the money, the guy with the titles behind his name, the guy with the credentials, or whatever it may be. And so you are fundamentally disempowered when you approach life in that way. That's one of the things that I want to dedicate my life to helping change, rather than having the same old conversations about how we should all be angry at this politician or how we should all vote that guy. I want to have more conversations that sell people, that pitch people on the idea that you are more powerful than anybody wants you to believe, anybody has ever taught you or told you. And the next time you find yourself laughing at the idea that, you know, can't make a difference, you should ask yourself who's laughing with you as you laugh at the idea of your own power. You should ask yourself who's winning when you buy into ideas like that, that you're some lowly little lackey who can't make a difference apart from what some politician does for you. I know who that belief is profitable for, and it's certainly not you. I know who wins and who gets to have a lucrative career and a lot of respect if you believe that, but it's certainly not you that wins. And I want to challenge people in that direction. I'm going to pause here. I can come back to this kind of talk. But I want to pause here and sort of just kind of use it as a setup. Like, that's why I care about this stuff. You know, it's not just about, you know, watching an episode of Oprah and then closing my eyes, burying my head in the sand and being like, I just want to feel good. You know, it's not something like that. It's having a respect for the radical nature of human individuality, of human creativity, and the incredible odds that we can overcome, the amazing innovations that we can produce when we have a world where one by one we effectively unplug people from the matrix of self-defeating thoughts and get people to take seriously this idea that, like, yeah, you're capable of more than you realize. My man, Deryk, what's happening, bro?
Hey, Satoshi Nakamoto and the magic Bitcoin.
Hey, man, Bitcoin is the magic penny.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's the thing that gives us special insight into things, gives us the ability to solve some problems, but I'd be willing to look crazy to everybody to believe in it.
Oh, it's totally true. I love the metaphor.
Yeah. Ocean, I wonder if the old guy just thought about robbing the bank every day, but never had the courage to act on it. But I think that's how the story ended. I want to tell you if you're right or not, but for the people that haven't seen it, go check it out. I love The Twilight Zone. If I can get more people in life to appreciate the writings of Rod Serling, then a large part of my life purpose will have been achieved.
Yeah, they don't make shows like that anymore.
Have you seen the new Twilight Zone?
No, I've only seen the old stuff. You got me. I mean, well, I already knew about the Twilight Zone, but I remember you were telling me about what's the episode called? It's like the thumping man. Well, it's with the guy. The guy has the devil or something like that in the cage or something, and the guy.
Oh yeah, the Howling Man.
The Howling Man. Yes, the Howling Man. That's so good.
That's one of my favorites, man.
I know. Yeah, well, you were telling me about that one in particular because I had already seen like a couple, but you told me about that one. I thought, and after I watched that, I was like, man, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't get into the newer ones because they all commit the fatal flaw of mistaking Twilight Zone for spooky. So they all try to be spooky. They all say, "Oh, Twilight Zone is plot twist, it's spookiness," and there's something about the spirit of Serling that all the remakes just miss.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Hey, what's up, Brendan Lee? For like a Twilight Zone story, yeah, man. Hey, by the way, I appreciate the work that you do. I don't interact with you much, but your video on the MetaNet, your video on Bitcoin, the videos on Streamanity. I even recently watched the chain death scenario one too, which was pretty interesting. But I love all your videos, man. I think you're a solid teacher and representative for Bitcoin. So thanks for the work that you do, man. Deryk, one cool thing about I don't want to talk about Twilight Zone all the time, but one interesting thing about Twilight Zone was when Rod Serling first pitched that show, he didn't pitch it as this kind of like these stories centered around this mysterious dimension or anything like that. He pitched them as sort of fables that provided moral lessons, and the advertisers were pretty scared of it. They were like, too controversial, it's too philosophical, it's very provocative. And so he went away and he redrafted his pitch, and he made everything take place in this, you know, you know, the middle ground between science and superstition, this shadowy realm. And then he went back to the advertisers and were basically like, no, this isn't about human beings. Certain questions we need to ask ourselves. These are beings in another realm asking themselves questions like, what is beauty? And they were like, oh yeah, this is great. We love it. As long as it's not about us.
Yeah, what's so great about that show too is that you can enjoy it at any level of sort of consciousness. So you don't need to watch it you don't need to get the message necessarily in order to enjoy it. Like I've seen younger people enjoy it, kids who just enjoy a good story. But then when you get older and start watching it, and you see what's really being said, then it gets really fascinating too, and you can enjoy it at that level again.
Yeah, that's a lot of the great writing has that in common, right? It can enjoy it as a child and not have to think very deeply about it, but then the more you learn, the more you get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like Bitcoin is kind of like the Twilight Zone too sometimes, in the way people behave and the way you feel in the space talking about it. It's like,
You got to expound on that. What do you mean?
well, it's just like this alternate dimension where people will do things that are crazy and you don't know how to deal with it, and there are hidden agendas with everybody. It's like with the Howling Man, like there are all these people trying to convince you to let the demon out of the box, and you've got to keep your head and keep sane and realize that there are ulterior motives everywhere.
Yeah, man. I think that's one of the most fascinating things about Bitcoin, that you can't go into this space naive, right? If the promises of Bitcoin, if the promises of what Bitcoin can achieve, even partially true, there's just a whole lot of stake, and we're on the cusp of the greatest revolution of our lifetime.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot more untrustworthy figures or figures who just have motives very, very different than yours, than people think. And you know, the classic ones are like, oh, I am like more like I'm for like a smaller government, and these guys are for no governments. Like those are ones we hear all the time. But that's just like surface level stuff. I mean, that's not nearly as important as maybe some of the other stuff when you look and you start thinking, well, is for example, like we were talking last night, I think on Voxer, is this dude like who's saying he helps Bitcoin? Is he actually like an intelligence agent? You know, and yet he's talking real smooth about how Bitcoin is going to make the world a freer place, and you know, supporting all these interesting or controversial ideas that change the nature of Bitcoin, and doing it in such a way that really sounds like he's on your team, right? And then maybe he's not.
You know, for someone that kind of newer to this space, what would you say to them asking why? I so much exception.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin has the potential to be one of the greatest changes in wealth and the way we interact as human beings and in power in history. You know, and being able to capture that, either capture it or redirect it towards your own ends is you know, an incredible opportunity if you can do it. An incredible opportunity for power, wealth, and control.
Let's dive into that, man. One of the things that I was sharing with everybody before you hopped on is that I've had and have tried to have lots of conversations with family and friends about Bitcoin. You know my personal story about how there's a group of guys that I'm really close to.
Yeah.
I reached out to them and was like, hey, download Hand Cash. I want to give you some Bitcoin. And they were like, looks like a scam. And at first I was just heartbroken, like, oh man, it's hopeless to get anyone excited about it. But I've had some conversations with different people in my life who are curious about it. And some of them just want to know more because they see how curious I am about it. And they're like, man, like this thing has really got your interest. What's this all about? And it's really hard to just find a single resource you can share with people that explains it. And it's an unfair demand, because if it's too easy to understand, it might not capture interest. It might be like, okay, or I kind of get it. It's like digital currency, right? All right, I don't think we need that. We already have PayPal. If it's too comprehensive, if it leaves no stone unturned, it's gonna put people to sleep right away. So I love to just have a link that I can share with people and say, hey, listen to my friend and I riff on Bitcoin for a little bit, and this will be your introduction. And I think maybe because I'm there and it's someone that I know, they'll listen, and maybe this can be something that creates curiosity. So I don't think we need to answer all the questions, but I love to create a link where we can create some curiosity. So you mind if I ask you some questions and then riff back and forth about the nature of Bitcoin and why it matters?
Yeah, let's talk about that. One thing too about your vague versus general, or vague versus specific kind of point, and I've noticed that people will ask me if I'm like you said, if I'm too general, it's not interesting or compelling enough. But then they'll ask me all these specific questions, and then you start to answer, and then their eyes will glaze over because it's too much. It's a lot of mental work even still to understand it. So there's a line to toe, between those two, which is very hard in explaining it. I've found, and some people simply don't want to listen to the very, very specific stuff, and I get it, because that's at a certain point, you start getting into monetary theory and stuff like that. So I'll be interested in seeing if we can craft something that is appealing to the widest possible number of people.
Yeah. So I'm not hating when I say this, but I want to read something that I see in the chat from Information U1881, and because this captures my challenge. You say Bitcoin takes the power out of money, and when I read that, I totally agree with that. But I have this foundation coming into it that enables me to see money as something that gives certain people the power to control. And I don't even think most people are there. Most people don't even stop to think of how control of the money supply is this monopolized, centralized thing that is tied to a lot of the evils in society that they look for other policies to help out with, right? Like I think people look at certain forms of evil in the world as just kind of, oh, nature produced that. It exists automatically. Figure out some policies that are going to help with it. It's like, man, no. Like there's so many things that are just artificially difficult because of fundamental misunderstandings about the nature of money and so forth. But anyway, so I want to get off into that. So Deryk, what is Bitcoin?
Yeah. Sorry, did it cut out?
Yeah, it cut out.
Sorry,
good.
What
is Bitcoin?
Oh, well, that is a wide question.
Okay, let me try to ask a better question, man. Now is the time for me to level up, step up my skills, practice my question asking abilities. Talk about this thing called Bitcoin on the news, and most people talk about it from the vantage point of, oh yeah, you heard about that Bitcoin thing? You buy some of that, pay yourself some of that, man. You're gonna make a lot of money. You're gonna get really rich. And I think for you, that's not. Yeah, that's cool if that can happen, but that's not the basis for your interest in Bitcoin, right? That's not that's not the only basis for why someone should consider it. Even if you're not one of the people that's going to get rich on it, even if no one's going to get rich on it, there's a unique kind of problem that Bitcoin can solve. So maybe we can start here, and we can unpack some of the details of what Bitcoin is all about as we discuss this. But what is the problem that Bitcoin solves? Is that a good entry point?
Well, yeah. So, I to start though, I mean, before we actually, I guess, get into some of the problems, I don't know if people need to care about the specific problem that Bitcoin solves in order to, or the specific like meta cultural problem that Bitcoin solves. And I'm not even sure that people knowing about that is the best way to spread adoption of Bitcoin. I mean, I think that wanting to get rich off your Bitcoin is a very valid, and I know not everybody in BSV agrees with that, but I think that that's economically unsound thinking. I think that wanting to get rich off your Bitcoin is a very respectable and very, simple idea and sell. And if people want to do that and they want to buy Bitcoin because they want to live a wealthier life, both off of this speculative value of the price going up in accordance with supply and demand, but also maybe some of the utility offered in a Bitcoin world, then that's great. And in fact, I think that's the majority of people will, if Bitcoin's going to be successful, people will use it for very non-ideological reasons. They're going to want to get in because it will help them be wealthier or freer. And that's fine. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. And I don't think that most people will necessarily deeply care about all of the problems that Bitcoin can potentially solve.
I like that. I like that observation, because the average person knows how to turn on the lights. The average person knows what to do if the power is out. And that doesn't require an in-depth understanding of the physics of electricity, right? And if we burden people with the need to understand all the technical aspects of something as a prerequisite for being able to use it, be able to enjoy it and appreciate it, that already makes it overwhelming.
Or all the philosophical aspects as well. So, I mean, there are plenty of things that I could riff on philosophically that make my life much better. So one of the guys you and I both enjoy reading is like Jeffrey Tucker. And one of the things that Jeffrey Tucker does really well is he writes about the sort of philosophy behind everyday goods and services that we take for granted, right? So he's written like pretty beautiful articles on things like shower heads, and milk, and things that are pretty common goods, but he puts them in the light of human flourishing. And when you look at it like that, it's like pretty actually incredible how important some of this stuff is. Or I mean, anything that we take for granted in daily life, like these goods ultimately have to be produced by somebody, by often very strenuous mental efforts, and yet the average person can just go out and buy them at a store and take them for granted and not really care about how much better they actually make like human existence as a whole. And all they're thinking about is, oh, this is solving my problem right now, right? Like the fork, for example. Like I can go buy a fork anywhere pretty easily, and it's a pretty trivial thing, and yet like it's actually a pretty important innovation in human history. So things like that, like what I mean is you don't necessarily need to know how important something is from the standpoint of like humanity in order to participate in it. And in fact, I'm not convinced that that's a good way to even sell people on Bitcoin.
I agree with you on that. Krawitz writes, it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So let's talk about that.
Well, yeah, and by the way,
Yeah.
I think it's perfectly legitimate to want to get rich, and so I want to make money. I mean, I would not be involved in Bitcoin if I didn't think I could make money. Let's say that. Like, if I didn't think that Bitcoin was going to make me much wealthier, I would not participate in Bitcoin.
Well, I agree with that. One thing I just want to add to it, though, is that I think there are two ways that become wealthier with Bitcoin. I mean, one way is you profit from the information asymmetry, the early mover advantage, right? If you accumulate what you know to be the unit of account by which people will measure wealth in the future, and when the future comes and the rest of the world catches up with your understanding, have increased, right? You are saving in the best unit of account. But the second way too is calmer. Even if you're the person that starts accumulating Bitcoins or like earning Bitcoins through work after, let's say, the price has stabilized, such a superior tool to anything we've ever seen that it can enhance the quality of your life in the same way or better than like the invention of the vacuum, the automobile, the television set, right? Like, I didn't get rich from the invention of the television set or the radio or the internet in any direct way. I didn't like buy shares of the internet or buy shares of Ford Motors to get rich from that. But the fact that that tool exists and I can use it, it makes my life richer because it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And so I always like to say we're all going to get richer from Bitcoin if it succeeds.
Yeah.
A word of encouragement down the road for the people that come in later and that are feeling like, oh, I missed out. Well, you missed out on a certain way of accumulating.
Yeah. So I agree with that. Like, Bitcoin makes the entire world wealthier. But I think that scenario you describe, where people are earning it and the price has stabilized, let's say, in some at least relative way to how it is now, that scenario you describe is one in which they no longer have a choice really about whether they're going to use Bitcoin or not at that point. So anybody we're talking to right now is necessarily an early adopter. And so the sell to them is I think the asymmetric advantages of early on. Whereas, like, in the scenario you described, I don't believe that you even need to sell that person on the fact that they will be wealthier in general using Bitcoin, even if they miss out on the asymmetric advantages, precisely because at that point, Bitcoin's so widespread that it doesn't actually matter what they think about it. They're going to use it anyway because of that's money. That's what people want to trade in. Does that make sense?
Point. Yeah, that's a real good point. That's a real good point. Right. In the same way that
you go.
Yeah, I was just gonna say in the same way that I don't need to run around telling people to use vacuum cleaners and automobiles, right? They get it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, so we're actually there's a certain point in which, like, even 5-10 years from now, the discussion could still be towards people who are going to be, early to mid adopters, and those people are going to get a disproportionate share of certain types of rewards. And that's the same thing with any industry too. Like new products start off as sort of small niche markets, and then suddenly they're everywhere at once. And the discussion being had is very different. So a lot of like novel products begin this way. I mean, it's where it's like a small group of people are using it, and like this is just something really cool. Maybe it's a bit expensive right now, and maybe the sort of everyday person or the media sort of talks about it and is like, why would someone use that? That's kind of stupid. And then suddenly it's like, it feels almost like overnight that it's just everywhere. That's why that Bitcoin article you shared the other day, I like that, the title, gradually then suddenly. And I feel like that's kind of how it will happen. And in that sense, all those people, I mean, the idea idea of saying, well, you'll be wealthier because of it, no matter if you participate. Well, I mean, I just think that those people aren't going to have a choice regardless. But I do agree that like it is useful to discuss that in the sense of a lot of people see it purely as this thing that you buy and hold, and you're just going to get rich off the speculative value. But I think it's still useful to understand the kind of world Bitcoin enables is a world in which there are greater possibilities for everybody to make money, even if you were not an early adopter. That's certainly true.
Yeah, I think I might have a little bit of personal defensiveness about it that you're making me realize, which is when you tell someone this concept of Bitcoin is limited to what they see on the media about number go up, that this is something that you're really interested in, it can kind of be easy for people to just dismiss you as, oh, you just think you're gonna get rich. You're one of the victims of the get rich quick thing, and you're the same type of person who's easily taken captive by any MLM that promises you easy rich. And I want people to see the basis, not only my curiosity, but for the curiosity of so many people that I have these great conversations with. Like, no, man, it's not like that. Like, there is no MLM makes me want to understand computer science. There is no MLM that makes me want to read about economics and monetary theory all day. There is no MLM that has ever made me want to learn like this. It's deeper than that. But you're absolutely right. I think maybe my hyper emphasis on that other aspect is a way of me trying to personal interest in Bitcoin, or what I perceive to be the beauty of Bitcoin from maybe the dismissive proclamations of, oh, that's just another Ponzi scheme, that's just another get rich quick thing,
Yeah, and we've all sort of encountered that in trying to explain Bitcoin. People will accuse you of that. I mean, and it's kind of like a frustrating accusation, but I don't think that that's necessarily an abnormal experience for anyone involved in something very early that is very controversial and niche. The accusation that you are in a cult, or you are trying to you're just trying to get rich or something like that. I think it's a pretty common experience, and I don't think you necessarily need to try to deal with those people. Those people will if you are correct in your bet, those people will see that you are right, and they will have to use something like that in the future. It's like the automobile, for example. Like when it first started coming out, like there was very much like a niche thing that no one thought was going to be a big deal, or like even the internet. I mean, like that famous quote for Paul Krugman saying the internet's not going to have any kind of impact on human life, and just sort of mocking people using it in the 90s. Obviously, there were large rewards for people who were early internet adopters, and who didn't listen to that, and who went out and actually made things on there in the early days before it was as ubiquitous as it is. But obviously, too, the internet's a good example, because obviously people are still getting rich on the internet, despite the fact that it's widespread. And that's the same thing with Bitcoin as well, is that there's the opportunities to get rich off of Bitcoin. There are still going to be plenty of opportunities, and in fact, probably more, the more useful Bitcoin becomes and the more widespread it becomes.
Yeah, one of the things you highlight for me when you talk about all that is how you could say there are two different senses of life, broadly speaking, where there are some people, they just get their kicks by seeing value before it's obvious and undeniable. And that applies to a whole bunch of things. Those people can be entrepreneurial, those people can be scientists, but there's a certain kind of person for whom joy and fulfillment and adventure is trying to anticipate where things might go, or trying to find the non-obvious. And then there's the other mindset that says, call me when all the questions are answered. Call me when all the debates are settled. let me know if there's an answer. Like, I don't really care about any of that. Like, if you come up with something useful, give me a call. And maybe that first personality type might be the kind that's worth focusing on when trying to maybe educate about Bitcoin. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, when you're actually trying to educate and get people to come and build useful things, I think that probably makes sense. And then I think beyond that, the rest of the people will be. And by the way, I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. I think the first crowd we're talking about disproportionately attracts crazy people and charlatans and other problematic people compared to the latter group, right? But it also attracts very interesting and creative and productive people as well. And that ideological sell is a very different crowd. The other people are just going to be attracted to it because they're, it's solving some issue in their life, right? I mean, or because they think they can make money. So something like Twetch, for example, it's like someone using that in the future will not be deeply ideologically committed to the value that Bitcoin offers, nor should they, because Twitch could never build a business off of the back of that. It'll be people who find that to be a better experience than Twitter and Facebook and other things like that.
Yeah. Hey man, let's dive into the Mr. No coiner, know nothing about Bitcoin, except whatever I've heard Don Lemon say. And okay, so I hear people talk about digital currency, and Bitcoin is apparently this thing on the internet that people are really into. It's really complicated and expensive to obtain some, whatever. Why do I need electronic cash? When I want to pay for things, I can use my Visa. I can send money through Zelle and PayPal. We can transfer things from bank account to bank account. Nothing's missing, it seems to me, for my ability to Amazon or any of that kind of stuff. So why do I need this digital currency called Bitcoin, or why would anybody be interested in that thing? What does it do that we can't already do?
Well, I think it gives you true control over your money in a way that people haven't had for a long time, especially in like the digital era. And as we move towards a society of sort of digital cash, the version we're using now is not that we have any control over, and Bitcoin gives you that control and takes it out of the hands of people like politicians who can either confiscate that money easily from you, trivially right now from you, or debase that money. Bitcoin allows you to actually control your online cash and prove that it is scarce and reliable easily. And I think that's a powerful tool for like the average person to be able to actually do that and actually be able to know that their money is not going to be seized or become worthless overnight. To me, that's very useful.
It's growing up as a kid, before anybody ever talked to me about any aspect of economics, I kind of just accept it from what I would hear the older people say, that as time moves forward, money just becomes less valuable, or things become more expensive. You hear your grandparents say things like, oh, that in my day, $1 bought you this and bought you that. Well, in my day, with $1,000, you'd be able to do all of these different things. And you're like, wow, like the 1960s, were amazing if you had money, right? And you don't kind of question why that is. And it just seems sort of like a built-in feature of reality or society, that your money just becomes less valuable. Your dollar just doesn't go as far with time. And but it actually speaks to the very control that you talk about. Satoshi comes right out of the gate in that white paper talking about how they can't be trusted to not debase the currency, right? And so you have this issue of money as we experience it is controlled by a central authority. You know, there is no free market with money. We don't have different entities competing with one another, being held accountable by competition to provide us with the best, most reliable, most trustworthy form of money. We just kind of have a centrally controlled, monopolized issuance of money, and they can print dollars as often as they want. So I think I've discovered true source, the audio problem. It's only those who are emperors of Bitcoin. It's like the sword and the stone. Only those who are truly worthy can remove the sword. I think it's kind of like in Chronicles of Narnia, where for some children, who, when the animals spake, all they heard was gibberish. And then there were others who heard the animals conveying meaning. That's what's happening right now. If you are a true, you can hear. Mr. Bitmonkey, what about me, man? What about me? River says back loud and clear. Don't touch anything, Andres. That's what they saying. That's what the people are saying. Ooh, back in the saddle. What's up? All right, we're back. We got 15 minutes. Okay. Listen, y'all, we've been talking about a lot of things. Let us know if you got any questions for Deryk and I. I mean, of course, we'll just go back to riffing back and forth, but let us know if you have any questions. If there's anything you want our opinions about, you want to hear us talk about something or anything along those lines, just put it in the chat and paying attention. Thank goodness we have sound. Only here, TK, because I'm the only one talking. Deryk, say something.
Hi, I'm here. I'm just waiting for us to get back on track.
Yeah. Okay, so keep talking some more because people are asking, "Where's Deryk? Where's Deryk?"
I'm here. Can they not hear me?
Keep going. I don't know if it's the delay or not, but Josh and River are both like you're not there.
Did they? I mean, I shouldn't be muted. You can hear me, right?
I hear you just fine, but that's been true.
And I've heard you. Yeah, I've heard you great the whole time. I don't know. Is it just you talking now, and they somehow muted me? This whole fix, or
yeah, okay? Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm getting mixed messages now. River Krawitz says they hear us both. All good now. Hey, Krawitz just asked a question. Let's riff on this. He says, "Tell us how so many people could think BTC is a good idea."
Oh wow. Well, I think that the human mind responds to reward and punishment, and that in BTC right now, the reward and punishment for believing in BTC have been both so great, or either believing or not believing in BTC have been so great that they have deceived themselves into thinking that they are correct. Like when I see someone like Dan Held say something that is just so monumentally stupid on Twitter, but he will be hired by Kraken to say stupid things, and he will get the illusion of approval with his Twitter likes and retweets and stuff like that. I think that is a powerful drug. A lot of people and that's what's going on. And likewise, that would all disappear tomorrow if Dan Held were to say, actually, I was lying, and I was not giving an honest portrayal of Bitcoin, right? That would all disappear. So giving that up would be a equally negative punishment as the positive reward for towing that line. So that's how I see it. Is it's a gravy train for the people at the top, and it doesn't appear to them to be in their self-interest to get off of that train. And I think when the incentives are right, people can believe just about anything.
I completely agree. I think some beliefs are just easier to have than others. I think there are certain conclusions in life that simply cannot arrive at unless you are prone to being skeptical of the mainstream narrative, and unless you are sufficiently incentivized by some goal or desire or need to have to look at things beyond the level of what the people you respect are talking about. I think if you're someone that's interested in Bitcoin, let's say you're someone that have discretionary income, you're running a business, you're relatively successful, or whatever it may be, you say, hey, I've heard a few things about this Bitcoin thing. I want to look into it. I think the overwhelming odds are in favor of the fact that ask someone you know. If you just Google it or go on Twitter and look for it, you're more likely to come into contact with something that is propped up by the narrative that BT is the way to go. It is the real thing. And I just think it takes a lot to get past that. Most people are looking at becoming full-time Bitcoin researchers. Most people aren't looking at going down the rabbit hole as far as they can go. They haven't been incentivized to do that. What's the easy answer? If I'm not thinking about it very deeply, if I'm just going with what the authorities say or going with what people I respect say, BTC has the most thought leaders, has the most influencers, it has the most blue check marks, has the most NFL players, has the most celebrities, has the most institutional people behind it, right? I mean, so it just seems obvious. And that's true of a lot of things.
I like to think of the intellectual path of Peter McCormack, which is kind of a funny example, because when he was first entering the scene as a podcast personality, he actually asked on our Bitcoin, he asked, I'm trying to see both sides of the scaling debate. And he asked a good question. I forgot the entire question, because it's now been deleted because they immediately deleted it from our Bitcoin, and he got a lot of crap for even asking the question. And I remember after that, a total shift in the way he acted. It went from someone who seemed like an honest guy who was interested in understanding Bitcoin to someone who had paid the reputational cost of asking the wrong question and knew to never ask that question again. And I think it's very easy to just at that point, once you've sort of made that compromise, I think it's easy to psychologize and rationalize and sort of deceive yourself into thinking, oh, well, I didn't actually make a compromise at all. In fact, I was just correct, or they were actually just correct, or something like that. And I remember I asked him a while back about that, and he's like, oh, well, I got the answers I was looking for anyway. And I remember laughing and thinking, this is exactly what someone who didn't actually get the answer might say. He paid a social price and then decided that getting the real answer was no the price.
Yeah, and if you can do that to people early enough, it's very powerful.
Well, and that's what happens. I mean, the path is usually not, oh, I start off as a core bot. It's, oh, I have some questions and I'm going to go on to Bitcoin and ask a totally rational, honest question. And the reaction ranges from, you know, a vicious sort of attack on my personal character, or like banning me from the subreddit. A lot of people, or they see that happen to somebody else, and they turn their mind off to the other possibility because the price is too high, or at least it appears too high. I mean, the price they're going to likely pay in the long run will be much higher than the fake social cost. You know, one of the reasons actually I like Bitcoin and I like the discussion going on BSV is precisely that. Bitcoin disincentivizes behaving or paying attention to fake signals. And at least Bitcoin in its original form does.
You know, you and I both have kind of experienced this. One of the things I've shared with you many times is when I first started tweeting about Bitcoin, I did so because I was interested in it. I was inspired by it and wanted to discover and connect with other people that share those same sentiments. And I still do feel this way. But when I first started, it was a really shocking experience because every single time I got attacked in some kind of way, people would block me, people would come at me. And when I say attack too, I mean, there were a couple of manipulative moves that people made. They would tag the organizations that I worked for, and they would say things like, "Hey, does Fee know you believe this stuff?" You know, like they thought that would like scare me away. "Hey, does Praxis know, you know, that you support Bitcoin SV?" And when I saw it, I laughed. I saw right through it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is someone who thinks they're going to intimidate me into shutting up about my actual questions and beliefs by tagging my employer in my post, when what I do for a living has nothing to do with where I come down on Bitcoin debate." But it's an effort to make me back up and get scared and be like, "Oh, well, I should shut up. I shouldn't ask questions online." And if I had done that, I wouldn't have met the people that I met. I wouldn't have got the answers that gave me more confidence in this path. And that could be a very easy thing to do. And I can imagine there are a lot of people that would succumb to that. They get intimidated and scared, be like, "Oh gosh, like I don't want to lose my job for this. I don't want to get in trouble with my employer for this. I don't want to lose my reputation. Maybe I won't ask questions on Twitter anymore. Maybe I won't share articles or like articles related to this topic on Twitter anymore." And then once you do that, even if you're still secretly interested, you've kind of cut yourself off the kinds of conversations that can accelerate your learning process, which makes it easier for you to be manipulated and misled, you know? And so I think the social cost is very real.
Well, that's why they do it, because the whole reason that they do it to you now is because it's been effective in the past. That's why it continues to happen, because in the past it's actually worked very well. And you can see a lot of these core guys, they still talk about reputation. Like, to them, that's a very important signal. And they will often say things like, "You've ruined your Bitcoin reputation. You've ruined your reputation with Bitcoiners." And you know, when they're saying that is where their priority lies. And if their priority lies in that, then it's very easy to be duped and misled because you are getting the wrong signal.
Absolutely. Hey, we just have a few minutes left, but I do want to give my 2 cents on this question from the Emperor here. TK, how can so many libertarians easily program? I think the answer is in the same direction as if I were to ask you, how can so many Christians believe in the Bible and be so easily enticed into accepting as true things that contradict the Bible, and be so easily tempted to live in ways that contradict the Bible? Well, because beliefs are cultural. And just because you have a good conclusion or a certain conclusion doesn't mean that you arrived at that conclusion by thinking you grew up in a home where those things were taught. I think this is true of most beliefs, whether people are conservative or liberal, whether people are Christian or Muslim. I think the overwhelming majority of people hold their beliefs based on the culture they find themselves being a part of, based on what the people around them believe. And so for most people, beliefs are far more psychological than philosophical. It's I endorse, advocate, support this particular position on this particular topic because that's the one that makes me feel connected to people, keeps me at peace with my family, makes life easy or easier, gives me some easy answers and so forth. Most people don't arrive at their beliefs by studying the philosophical foundations of it. Most people don't arrive at their beliefs by investigating the best skeptical arguments that can be made against what they believe. And I don't think libertarians are different. I've spent a lot of years of my life at libertarian conferences, and in many cases, people who profess to be libertarians are no different than the cafeteria Catholic who goes to church every Sunday, knows all of the gestures, knows all of the rituals, can recite all of the prayers, and doesn't have a single clue about the writings of the church fathers, the teachings of the scriptures, anything that the catechism says, whatever the theoretical underpinnings of their belief system ought to be. Libertarianism is the same. Derek and I have both seen this. There are lots of people that they're libertarian because they're weird. They're libertarian because they want friends. They're libertarian because they don't like liberals or conservatives. They're libertarian because they are against drugs. There's one little aspect of freedom that they care very deeply about, and then they don't bother to investigate any deeper than that. And so, you know, easy come, easy go. When your beliefs are based on a weak foundation, it only takes a weak temptation to pull you away from it. That's my take.
I don't really have anything to add to that. I mean, that's been my experience. That a lot of these people are sort of like you've used this metaphor before, like jet skiing across the surface of ideology, and they're just moving on to the next thing, sort of. And the label is convenient while it's useful. You know, it's something that can be tossed aside if needed.
Yeah, 100%. We're at 9, so I think River is going to be popping in pretty soon. So we're just here holding it down until we see River pop up in the call. You know, I'll go back to a metaphor that I shared very early on, which was the Matrix, and how Morpheus and Commander Locke had their moment. And Morpheus said, you know, Commander Locke's like, not everybody believes what you believe. And Morpheus says, you know, fortunately, my beliefs do not require them to. Growing up in the church, I kind of had this evangelical view of popularizing good ideas, or what I thought to be good ideas. And so my attitude at that time as a kid was the best way to promote an idea is to convince as many people as possible through preaching, through argument, through proselytizing, to accept your beliefs as true. As I've gotten older, I've developed more affinity for remnants, and I have become less impressed by results generated from the popular vote when it comes to implementing ideas in reality. And so I just don't think it's all that important to try to reach as many libertarians as possible and tell them to form their beliefs in the right way. I think it's much more valuable to invest in remnants, the people that do care about the foundations, and to equip those people with the resources and the tools they need to build. Because I believe that big movements are not the result of getting masses to adopt it first. It's the result of getting the remnant, the people on the fringe, the bold minority to do something with the idea. It makes it more obvious to the rest of the world. The rest of the world isn't going to respond to arguments. They're going to respond to creativity, to utility, to something that has become so obviously valuable that it becomes increasingly more difficult to deny.
By the way, if people don't know what the remnant is, a good essay to read is Isaiah's Job by Albert J. Nock. And he says in there, he said, the remnant are those who by force of intellect are able to apprehend these principles, and by force of character are able, at least measurably, to cleave to them. The masses are those who are unable to do either. So it's a really, really good essay. Highly recommend it.
Some stuff. Well, hey everybody, this has been really fun. River, how's it